Hello friends, it's DasFood, and today we are going to be talking about the least fun killers in Dead by Daylight to face. Now, just to clarify, just to make sure nobody's left in the dark on this, we are not talking about the least fun to play as. I am emphasizing this is to face, because honestly, the list changes a lot if we say the least fun ones to play as. So I just want to get that out there, and I want to add a couple of caveats before we get going. So the first thing I would like to put out there is that we are not assuming that all of these killers are being played at an insanely high level every time you face them. I am allowing for the occasional game where you get a god tier player of whatever killer it is, but more often than not, we're going to assume that these are somewhere in the realm of decent to good, right? We're not going to assume they're terrible, we're not going to assume they're great, we're just saying, you know, your kind of average experience with this killer, what's it going to look like? And that's really the only caveat there, because I realize that some people are going to come in and say, oh, well, I faced a nurse who I couldn't get 2 seconds without yada yada. And I get that. I understand it's a real problem, but it's just not going to factor in here for the time being. So without wasting any of your time, I want to get into how I broke this down, because I tried to apply some kind of science to it, because again, it is a pretty subjective thing. Everybody has their reasons for disliking one killer or the other. After looking at the entire roster of killers, I tried to figure out what it was that generally made people dislike a killer. And what I came up with were 4 different categories, I guess, that you could put killers into that would make them just not super fun to face. And I'm going to go over those right now. Those being that they are extremely strong, that they reward camping, that they just simply have obnoxious mechanics to deal with, or that their one-on-one, the 1v1, the chase, is really boring. And those are the 4 things I think generally are going to turn people off from liking a killer. So let's get into those and see. Let's start with the extremely strong. Who's extremely strong? Who is perhaps OP, perhaps broken? You know who they are. It's Nurse, it's Spirit, it's Blight. Those are the 3 that I think definitely fit into that category, more so than any other. All 3 of those are extremely strong in the 1v1. They are, I mean, again, they're borderline too strong. And you're going to find people who say they are too strong. You're going to find people who say they're not. As for me, I don't think any of them are too strong currently, except maybe Nurse. Maybe we talk about Nurse at some point. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with where they are. They're just extremely strong. And some people don't want to have to play that hard. If you go up against a good player behind one of these killers, your odds of survival are not super great. Now, going to the other end of the talent spectrum, whereas you have to be really talented to chase people down with somebody like Nurse, Spirit, or Blight, and, well, Nurse or Blight. You have to be talented to chase them down and kill the whole team, maybe the traditional way. These are the killers who are rewarded by heavy amounts of camping, those being Trapper, Hag, Cannibal, and Twins. Again, I understand why people hate camping. I think you should be allowed to camp without getting, you know, roasted for it in the post-game chat. But I do understand that people do not like camping. And I understand why they don't like camping. I understand, which I guess I'm just going to keep saying I understand until you say like, hey, wow, this food, he's an understanding guy. But anyway, I understand that sitting on the hook is not fun. I understand that having to hammer out gems because you can't rescue your buddy is not fun. I get that. And then I also understand that as the killer, it's not that fun to just sit there. Unless maybe you're like the cannibal and you're doing a basement baba or something like that. And then it's kind of fun, right? It's kind of funny at that point. But I understand where people do not like camping. And I can see where that is a major factor in who people don't like to face. Next up, we have the killers with obnoxious mechanics. Now, this one, I mean, this is the most subjective of all of them, right? What constitutes an obnoxious mechanic? Hopefully you'll kind of have some semblance of understanding where I was coming from once you hear who I've put in there. And it was quite a few of them. It was 8 of them, making this far and away the largest category. It was Doctor, Nightmare, Nemesis, Legion, Plague, Executioner, Artist, and Cenobite. Each one of these killers has something about them that is just really not fun to play against. It doesn't mean that any of them are overpowered, because a lot of them I just mentioned are not overpowered, but you can't actually look at me and tell me that you enjoy your average Doctor game, that you enjoy Legion playing stabby with everybody. You know, you enjoy having to be the one who always goes to find the box when you're playing against Pinhead. You know, these are obnoxious killers to face in their own rights. I'm not saying that doesn't mean you can't have a fun game against them. I am saying that their mechanics are built in such a way that I fully understand those who do not enjoy playing against them. Another thing people don't tend to enjoy is 1v1 chases that are just not that fun. And it pains me to do it because, oh gosh, I have some of my mains in here, but especially my big main, but there are only 4 in this category. I put Clown, Deathslinger, Executioner, and Nemesis. None of these guys are especially fun to take on in a 1v1. Probably Clown more so than anybody, because Clown is just all about pre-throwing pallets and keeping your distance, and that's not fun. There's not a ton of talent associated with looping a Clown. It's really just expending resources until he runs out of time. And then, you know, the final gen pops and you power the gates and you get out. It's not super fun. Nobody likes a boring 1v1 chase, and I think all 4 of those killers definitely fall into that category. But now it's time for actual rankings. I wanted to rank them, and I want to come up with who were the least fun ones. But I'm only going to rank the top 5, right? I'm not going to go through and rank all of them that I just mentioned, because I think some of them do have, I guess, reasons that you could say, well, they're not that bad. So let's start off with several of these who, they may not be that fun to play against, but they're far too weak to be considered the most obnoxious killer to play, right? The least fun killer to play. Because you might not love your games against a Trapper, a Doctor, a Clown, a Legion, a Deathslinger, or a Nightmare, but you're still likely to win those games more often than not. And winning is fun, so I don't really feel like I can put any of them in the top 5. On that note, while some killers are much stronger, they're also way more fun in the 1v1. So for this one, I'm going to look at Nurse and Blight. And I understand that God tier Nurses and God tier Blights are absolutely crushing in the 1v1. But the average Nurse and Blight you play are going to actually be a lot of fun in the 1v1. Next up, while their playstyle encourages camping, the twins have 2 things going for them. One of those being hijacking Victor and leaving Charlotte a basic M1 killer, which greatly hurts their viability. And the other thing being kicking the baby, which it's always going to be fun. It will always be satisfying to kick Victor. So I can't really put them top 5, but there's no doubt that they are encouraged to camp by what their power is. A quick, I guess, admission I have to make is that I find a lot of charm in Leatherface's. I really find it funny more often than not when I get a basement Bubba. So maybe you don't, but I do, right? I enjoy going up against Bubbas because if they're basement Bubbas, they are playing true to a meme and it's funny and I have a good time with that. And if they're not, I love trying to bait the chainsaw. Trying to bait the chainsaw and trying to make sure you don't run into dead zones is extremely fun. I think Bubba's actually, I think he's fun to play as and play against, and I'm kind of surprised by how many people hate him, but I also know people hate camping, so I think that's influenced the community in a big way. Next up, we have Nemesis, who, I don't know, man. Look, a late game Nemesis is just miserable to play against. But honestly, it's not even his power that gets him here. It's more so the zombies. The zombies are obnoxious. Are they strong? No, hell no. But are they fun? Not really, no. They'll block off loops that you otherwise could have run successfully. They'll run you off of gens that you'd like to do. You can choose to waste a pallet on them, but I mean, realistically, you shouldn't. You can use your flashlight on them. I would say you probably should do that, but even then, again, if you had plans to make flashlight saves, okay, well, those are kind of done. And overall, I think Nemesis just brings a certain level of obnoxiousness to the game. And a personal gripe for me is the sound it makes when you're infected. That just makes my skin crawl. It is gross. I do not like it. And I understand that's such a silly reason to dock him points, but I don't like the sound it makes. It's really gross. Even though you are infected, so I guess that's fair. You want to feel a little gross when you're infected. So they did their job, but if it needs to be noted, their job was to annoy you with it, right? So Nemesis, by no means am I saying he's OP or anything like that, but I don't think he's especially fun to play against. Last up, before we get to the top 5, we have one who I really wanted to put in the top 5, but I just couldn't quite do it. That being the Plague. So the Plague is really strong, and she counters a lot of what's going on in the meta right now. And in the same way that I don't like Nemesis, the constant little sound you have when you're infected, I don't think anybody likes the wheezing coughs that you get when you're infected from the Plague's vomit and the constant puking. It's a thing that, does it bother me? Yes. But I'm pretty okay with it. But I can imagine those of us who are, those in the audience, I guess, who are germaphobes probably really, really hate this killer and would put her top 5, if not number 1. Overall, though, survivors do have some say in how her power is used, and I think that adds something interesting to the game, so if not for that, she would have easily made the top 5, but because survivors do get some agency in facing her, I think that's a redeeming quality. All right, and with all of that out of the way, we are finally here for the top 5. First up, and look, I'm going to keep these brief. I'm not going to keep you here too long. I was going to boom, 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 let you get through these so you can go to the comments and tell me why I am a genius or an idiot or somewhere in between. Number 5, we have the Executioner Pyramid Head. Look, so I love Pyramid Head. I am so glad he's in the game, but I can't deny that he's just like Huntress, just without so many of the safeguards that keep Huntress from being OP. He is able to use infinite amounts of Punishment of the Damned. And honestly, he puts you in the same type of damned if you do, damned if you don't situations that Huntress does, but he does it without the same counterplay. And I don't know. Well, you could make a case that it's easier, and I would make the case that it's easier to hit a fully wound up hatchet than it is to hit Punishment of the Damned. That doesn't mean it's hard to hit Punishment of the Damned. Really good Executioner players, or even not really good, just good Executioner players, are going to hit far more often than they miss, and they're going to be very confident in that. And overall, I just feel like the Executioner can be so suffocating if you don't play a really good game. So if you're kind of off, I think it's going to be a long game against Executioner. Next up, we have the most recent killer, the Artist, and look, you guys, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what Behavior was thinking here. And I realize there's always some recency bias, right? A new killer comes out, and you're always going to hate or love them more strongly because they're new. And I tried to account for that, because when I first started making this list, I kind of thought she'd probably be like number 2 or 3. I'm putting her at 4. I think that overall, she's not strong enough to be any higher up on this, but it's almost like they made this killer in an effort to send people to VHS. Like, hey, go play the competition. They don't have the Artist. She is so boring in the 1v1. It's just not a fun power to try to counter. And again, it's not because it's so brokenly overpowered. It's just boring. It's just a really boring power. And I think that's my final word on Artist, right? It's boring. When I think of her, it's just like, ooh, yikes. I don't think we're going to be seeing a lot of this killer within like a month. I think that she's going to fade from the meta pretty quickly. If she's even in the meta right now. I think I see enough Artists right now because she's still new and she's good enough that people are playing her. But I think in time she'll fade and she'll be one of those kind of like the twins where it's like, oh, is she good? Yeah. Do people play her? No. Coming in at number 3, we have the Cenobite, Pinhead. And honestly, he ultimately comes down to one big issue, and that is that there is no killer you want to see less when you are solo queuing than Pinhead. See, if you have a 4-stack of like a Survive with Friends and you're all on comms, he's no big deal. You're not gonna suffer from that because you can talk and you can say, hey, so-and-so, could you go grab the box? You're closest to it. And they'll say, yeah, I can go grab the box. And you can communicate who needs to go grab the box. The lament configuration, right? You can discuss who needs to grab it, when they're going to grab it, all of that. But when you play solo queue, one thing I have found is even at red ranks, nobody grabs the damn box. And it just shocks me. It is the most frustrating thing in the world that I cannot rely on anyone else to ever grab the box. It feels like no matter how long I wait, even if I'm waiting just up until the chain hunt's about to begin, people just aren't interested in grabbing the box. And it takes what should be fairly underwhelming power and makes it rather devastating. At least in Dead by Daylight's current state, where you never know what your teammates are up to, so you can't see that they're all sitting on gens, or 2 are sitting on gens and one's being chased or whatever. It's really hard to know that nobody's going for it. And I think that he's the bane of the solo queue existence. And I like Pinhead, the Cenobite. I enjoy having him in the game. I think that overall trying to dodge his hooks is fun. And honestly, that was the main reason that he came in at 3 instead of 2, was I think his power itself is actually kind of fun to mess around with. But yeah, if you're solo queuing and you see a Cenobite, just know it's probably going to be a long game. And you're probably better off going to grab the box every time it pops up because you just can't count on your teammates to do it. Next, we have the killer who I initially thought would be number 1, but the more that I broke down what it is that people like and dislike in facing killers, I couldn't quite put her at 1, but it's going to be the Hag. I think Hag is the camper's dream. This is, if you are somebody who likes to put somebody on a hook and never go very far away, Hag, that's your girl. You're gonna love Hag. As a personal aside, her power gives me headaches more often than not. So she's my personal choice for number one, but I understand that most people don't get headaches from playing her. It's just something about the way she pops up and does that roar and all that. I find I get headaches very frequently playing a Hag. And maybe there's like stress headaches, right? Like it's like, ah, oh, it's another Hag. But yeah, I don't know. I get headaches playing Hag, and that's very obnoxious to me. But I'm not really going to dock her points for that because that's got to be a small percentage of the population, right? That's probably not something that a lot of people are having to deal with. What a lot of people are having to deal with, though, is that the Hag is designed for camping. She is a camping killer amongst camping killers, and I just don't even find her to be funny in the same way that like a Basement Bubba is. I just don't have fun against Hags. The main reason that Hag is at 2 instead of 1 is because it's really, really easy to beat bad, mediocre, or even just slightly below average Hags, which I guess would be mediocre, now that I think about what that word means. It's pretty easy to beat those types of Hags, but even then, she justifies her place because those bad Hags, all they need is the one down, and they're going to camp the hell out of that person. And it's just not that fun. Yes, there are a couple counters to Hag. Yes, she's got some areas where she's pretty weak. But overall, I just think I just don't have fun with her. I never have a fun Hag game. I have never, to my knowledge, I've never had a Hag game where I left it and I was like, wow, that was a really fun time. I enjoyed that. And finally, at number 1, you probably guessed that this one would be up there. You may have thought that she'd be number 1, but it is the Spirit. So, unlike the other two S-tier killers, which would be Blight and Nurse, Spirit is pretty easy to play well, to play her effectively, even against good players. Within a few games, you understand what it is you need to do with Spirit. Her power makes chases as frustrating as they are boring. I just don't think that... I don't think there's enough counterplay to make Spirit fun. Is she still overpowered? No, I don't think so. I don't think she's overpowered anymore. But I do think she's just boring. It's not fun, right? It's not fun, and while it's not quite a 50-50 anymore, I don't think they did enough to make her... obviously, when you take a killer who is somewhere in the 1 to 2 slot, and you nerf her, quote-unquote nerf her, and she falls back to the 3 slot, that's not a heavy nerf. She's still extremely strong, and again, when I die to a Spirit, I don't have the same feeling that I have when I die to a Nurse or Blight. Because Nurse and Blight, I'm kind of like, okay, they've put in the hours. Spirit, I don't know if that's the person's 300th game as Spirit or 3rd game. I really don't know because it's not that hard to play her well. And overall, I think she is the least fun killer to play against. She is the only one who I load in and I'm like, damn, I wish I was not so against DCing. I just don't enjoy Spirit games, but that's me. Maybe you love Spirit games. Maybe you're a Spirit main, or maybe you're just somebody who really enjoys playing against Spirit. Let me know down below who your least favorite killer to play against is. And do you think I missed some kind of criteria, right? Is there some aspect to this that's like, well, you're not considering this, and that's a big factor in how fun they are to play. But until next time, that's going to do it for me. I've been Das Food. Bye, friends.